Good morning, good morning. How's everybody doing? Sue's here, just popping in to do a few little demos this morning. I hope you're all doing well. It's a funny old day out there, isn't it? It's still blowing a hoolie, seems to have been blowing a hoolie for several days, but there you go, not much we can do about that. Hope you're all doing okay. Anybody suffering storm damage today? Okay, so I've got going, and I am at the situation that we're usually at, where we're in the group and trying to see whether or not you can see us. If you can, that's lovely. Right, here we are. I think I'm ready to get going and hopefully have a bit of a play. Okay, so I was up at the studios, Create and Craft Studio, on Thursday, and I was lucky enough to be able to demo some of Andy Skinner's new stamps, and so I thought I'd come in and have a little play with you this morning and show you some of the things we can do with them in a slightly more relaxed way. I always find the TV quite stressful, but I'm also very privileged to be able to do it. It's great fun, lovely people. Okay, so I've got a bit of watercolour cardstock here. This is what I'm going to show you quickly how to make. Watercolour cardstock. One of Andy's new combination of stamps is called Strike a Pose, and it's these two film stamps, film strip stamps, which are really good fun. And so I'm going to show you one of the ways that I use these. So I've got my little stamp press, and this is great fun. I love this because the lid comes off, so I can use it as a plate as well. Pop in the stamp. And I'm going to get my little stamp. I'm going to use this one, which is sort of like an old-fashioned 8mm, if anybody remembers those. I'm going to pop that down, line that up, and then put my lid on. If these don't stick, if you find with any of our stamps that they're not sticking to the plate, then it's usually because either the plate or the stamp just need a bit of a wipe. So I find a little bit of antibacterial hand gel is really good. You could try water to start with, but if that doesn't work, a bit of hand gel usually does the trick. Also gets off acrylic paint as well, which is great. Right, so I've just inked that up, and I've just used Vintage Photo, which I think you'll probably find is a favourite with loads of people. And I'm going to give that a little press. Turn that round, give it a little press down. Lift that up. There you go. It's probably a little bit wonky, but that's the story of my life, not a problem. Now I've got my spritz bottle, and all I'm going to do now is give that a little spritz of water. Oh, love that spritz of water. Okay. Now, what you tend to find with this particular ink, and this is with the oxides as well, I love the oxide inks as well, is that when they start to dry, you get this kind of variation of colour, which means it's a very easy way of making a card that looks quite complicated. So that is pretty much all I did with that, and then I give that a little dry off with my heat gun. If you want to, you can just let it have a little tip up. Let's give it a little tip. There's a bit too much water there, so I'm going to suck a bit of that up with a bit of kitchen towel. As you do, because otherwise I think it's going to go everywhere. Give that little tap. And then that is enough to give that a really fun look. And that is all I did to get that card. Now this is one of the little pop-ems that we had on the show. They're great fun. Most of us have got hearts of some sort in our stash, haven't we? And if you haven't got a heart, you can always just cut one out. Super easy to make. But these are the pop-ems. These come in a little pack of different size ones. and it was one of the little ones at the bottom that I used. These are just the usual sort of grey board thing, which are really easy to paint. And once I painted them with one of Andy's magenta paints, I then went over with some of the this stuff, Cosmic Shimmer Clear Varnish Lacquer, which gives it that sheen. So I'll show you how this looks if I start to dry it off. I'll do it on the softer one so that you don't have to listen to the noise too much. And just tip that up. It's pretty easy. And actually what I'll do is I'll come back to this at the end and then we'll see. Hopefully that will have dried a bit more rather than you having to watch me dry it. Okay, so then all I would do is lay that up onto a bit of red cardstock. And then onto my card blank. This is one of, you know, you find those really old card blanks. I've got a bit of ink on there, so I'll just turn that over and pop that down. And then I'll just add the heart. The words that I put on here, they were from a book. I had this really old book with pages falling out of it. So I basically just do this thing where you just take a page out and just look for something. And this says wishing you hope. I was looking for wishing you love. I couldn't find love on the page. I thought I'm not going to spend 3 hours reading a book just to get that word. Hi Sandy, yes, it was just water, that's all. And because these are water reactive inks, they work beautifully with that. So let's get that out of the way and move on to something else. Right, what else should I show you? Oh, upcycling. Anybody into upcycling? I do love a bit of upcycling. So I had these old coasters, and I think they were just covered with a picture, and the picture had started to peel off. So I pulled off the picture and then I painted them and stamped them. So I'll show you what I did. I basically gave them a coat of white chalk paint, and this was the, which was it? La 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 la. Yeah, it was this one. It was a warm white, which is a slightly off-white chalk paint. And then what I did was I came in with Andy's Artist Pigment paints, and the lovely thing about these paints is that they are translucent, and the reason that they are translucent is they don't have the matting agents and one of the other ingredients that bulk out a lot of paints, and that means that they are super bright and very translucent, so they can act a bit more like inks. So if I just pop that down, I'll start off with the yellow. Don't you just love just sitting down swooshing with a bit of paint? There's something just really fun about it. Right, I'm going to slow down because I tend to get a bit chaotic when I start doing this sort of thing, so that I don't bore everybody. And then I make mistakes and look at it. So there you go, there's a bit of this. And then if I bring my little water pot a bit closer so I'm not leaning over the other half of my studio. And these again are water reactive, so I'll give that a little spritz of water and that'll clean those up. This is just one of those old, you know those hair heat defence things that you get for your hair. When they're empty, they're great little spray bottles. So I've got the yellow. Now if you want to tone down the yellow, then go back in with the chalk paint, because the chalk paint, the very nature of a chalk paint is that it's opaque. And so while you've got the translucency of the Artist Pigment paints on one hand, which you can do an awful lot with, just by taking a bit of chalk paint you can tone them down and make them a bit more opaque. And then what I'm going to do is come in with the blue, the primary blue. Now anybody that's starting to learn about colour theory, which is what I'm trying to do at the moment, will know that just those three colours, the primary blue, yellow and either red or magenta, primary magenta is what Andy's got in his range, with these three colours, the amount of colours you can mix with these three is vast, absolutely vast. So let's pop a little bit of the blue down. Might be too much, so I'm going to go off there. And just have a little bit of fun blending. You could do this on your gel plate if you wanted to. I'm a huge fan of the gel plate. But the thing with this is to not overthink it. Just have a bit of fun. And when you're happy with that, put that to one side. And again, what I'll do, rather than dry that and be really noisy, I shall put that to one side to dry, and we will come back to it. So that's going to stay up there. I'll give my thingy a little mop up. How's everyone doing? Are you all struggling with the storms today? Can't believe it's just storm after storm, isn't it? Storm after storm. Now, if I just show you something else that I did as well. You, I don't know, quite a few of you, I imagine quite a few of you are into your journaling. And this is a little journal that I've got. And because it was plain, it was just like this. It was just plain, shiny, a bit dull. So again, I took some chalk paint. This one, which was, I love this colour because it's not as harsh as the black. Midnight is what it's called. So it's a very dark grey, and it's just really useful. So just cleaning up my other stamp. Take that one off. Yeah, we've been very lucky. We've managed to escape most of the storm damage. Next door's lost a bit of their trellis, and my hubby just had a chat with them, popped it back up for them, so that was easy. So what I did was, because there's no point in me going on to the back of this, so what I've done is I've cut a piece of card, similar sort of size, which I could very easily cut down and stick in here. But just to show you how I did this, so I basically took this chalk paint and then just to make sure that this is fully dry, and the lovely thing about chalk paint is it does dry, it's super duper quick. Just use my anti-static bag just to make sure that there's no moisture resident on there, and then I'll come back in with my stamp press. Let's have a look, I've lost that already. Okay. This one is a Vasson Creative stamp press. I have actually got the Tim Holtz stamp presses as well, but this one I found really easy because the top's detachable, and that means that you don't need as much space. With the other ones, you have to have sort of this much space to be able to, you know, the whole width of it to be able to ink up, and with this one you don't. You can just put this on top. So let's work out where this is going to go. So have it that way. Pop it somewhere about there. And what I'm going to do with this is ink it up with some Versamark clear sticky ink, and then I'm going to use some Vandy's embossing powders, which are I would call them a mixed media embossing powder because they are super duper chunky. Oh, thank you, Sandy. Yeah, if you are having trouble choosing colours, I'll tell you what's really easy. If you just go to Pinterest and put in colour palettes, and you can actually be specific and put in green colour palettes, or it will bring you to pages where they show you sort of decorating and things like that, and it will have a whole range of colours that go together. So that means you've got a super easy way of knowing, without even thinking too much about it, what things are going to work together. As I say, I'm trying to learn colour theory at the moment with a lady called Carol Sykes. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's got a company called You Can Folk It. So I'm learning decorative painting with her. I've known her for several years. She's a lovely lady, and she's doing a thing on colour theory. So that's testing my brain. Which isn't a bad thing, is it? Takes your mind off all the other stuff going on in the world. Right, so giving this a little press down, and because I can't see it particularly, I'm going to go back in with one more press. One more press. Give that a little squidge. You really do need to take your time when you're stamping and just don't hurry it if you can. My first show on Create and Craft on Thursday was awful. I was rushing and my stamping was appalling. Absolutely appalling. And in the second show, I was with Lowen and she's so gorgeous. She's so much fun. And it was completely different. It was very relaxed and yeah. So, and that was just because I've just basically calmed down a bit and got on with it. Right, so I'm going to use this colour, and this is called, even the name's good, Funky Cold Patina. And if I just take the lid off and show you that. Hi Noreen, hi. So can you see those gorgeous granules? It's almost like coppers and whites and blacks and greens and turquoise all in one pot. So that's pretty cool. So I'm going to take this off. I'm happy with that stamping. I'll take this off, give myself a little bit more space. And again, because the lid comes off, I don't have to worry about turning it over and getting this all mucky. I can just put that on top, which really suits me because I am super mucky. I've got myself a piece of card. As you do, you know, we all have to get our little scraps of card, don't we, to capture the embossing powder. So I've got that ready. So I'm going to give this a good old give it a shake, and then you'll get all the different granules. So this powder is not the best powder for detailed embossing. If you've got really fine work that you want to capture, I would use a detailed embossing powder like the black or the white. So for example, this one, which is a Cosmic Shimmer, and it's called Detail Black, and that will capture the tiniest of detail. Whereas because this one's got chunky powders, it's you can still do it. You can still do it, but you might not get the crispness that you want. Right, so I'm going to use a Woodware heat tool. This is another one of those things I would never have bought in a million years, but because they sent it to me, I gave it a go. Wow, it's super quick, super quick. I've got the Ranger one that I use certainly when I'm doing classes, because the Ranger one's a lot quieter, but this one's really fast. So I'm going to bring that up to temperature. It's always a good idea. And I'm going to use the highest heat setting. I'll turn this down because it looks upside down. There we go. And I'm going to give that just a few seconds. Yes, Noreen, thank you. It's a beautiful colour, isn't it? It is my favourite colour. If you ever look at my page and you see the pictures of my studio, it's all turquoise, blue and turquoise. Right, this is feeling quite warm, so I'm going to bring this up. Forgive the noise. This won't take long. And the trick is to move it slowly and don't waft it. So I think that is done. Okay, so what I've got here is a little red heart, and again that was one of the ones from the Arty Poppums, and these are sort of slightly irregular shaped, which are quite fun. I quite like that. I like things that are a bit different, not quite normal. And I've painted that with the magenta, which is a lovely vibrant colour. It's really nice, and you could edge that with all sorts of things. You could even go around that with embossing powder. But one of the things that I did was I've got one of Andy's other stamps called Blowing Bubbles, and this is the girl. She's amazing. I love this. And I just used the bubbles on that, and then I came in with one of his other embossing powders, which is called Satin Sunset. I'll show you that in a minute when I've done that. And again, I just, because you don't need to use all the stamp, when you've got a stamp like this, you've got all these different elements you can just pick out. So if I just get this one, ink the bubbles, and then I'll just go with my hand. I don't need a stamp platform for this. I can just do it randomly. Didn't even use my anti-static bag. Such a risk taker, aren't I? Okay, so here's this powder, the Satin Sunset, and again you've got this combination of colours, reds, sort of yellowy golds. You've even got sort of almost like olivey green or moss colour in there as well. And of course when you shake them, the darker, the bigger granules come to the top. Just give that a little shake over the top. Tip that off. And then put that to one side. And it's a much smaller bit to emboss, so this is going to be super, super quick. Tip those back in. Little flickety, flickety, flickety. Right. Lid on. I really do recommend you put your lids back on everything straight away, because I speak from experience. The amount of times I've knocked things over, of course, chaos and mess. It seems to be a bit of a signature of mine. Now for this, I will use a pokey tool to hold this, because it's quite small and I don't want to burn my fingers. So again, get your heat gun up to temperature. Yes, Noreen, they are both Andy Skinner powders. Here we go. You see how quickly that's going. Because my heat gun was quite hot, that went quite fast, so we like that. Now the other thing that I did on this one was I used his transfers. So he's got these really fun transfers. Some of them, I'll be honest, some of them are not quite me. I'm not really into skulls and things, but he's got quite a lot of them which are very funky. They're sort of farm, so these are the ones that are a bit more sort of Andy, you know, skulls and skeletons and things. That's very Andy. Bless him. And these ones are sort of steampunky, and he's got a whole range of these transfers. Now what I love about these transfers is that you can just take an element, a little bit of them, or you can take the whole thing. So for example, what I did here, when you use these transfers, it's a good idea to take them out of the packaging. It's always handy. But cut out the bit that you're going to use. So if I was going to use, well, let's say, shall I use this lizard thing? And the other good thing about these is that you can, because they're on this transparent paper, you can see what's going to fit and decide from there. So get a skull on there. Or I could just do a bit of a circus one. Don't have to use the whole thing, do you? Let's use that one. So I'll trim that. And oh, actually, I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to go to this French Fancy. I love this. This is far more me. What could we put on there? Oh, yeah, let's put that one on there. That's a nice one, like that. We like that. So that might work quite nicely for number 67 Paris. Or the stamp. Let's have a look. I'm going to cut out the Paris bit. Sandy, I use these transfers all the time. If I've got a card or a mixed media piece that, and I've got a space and I don't know what to do with it, I'll just chop out a bit of one of these, and they're so easy to use. So, and because you can see where you know, you can sort of test them out, put them in place, see how they look without actually using them. It just gives you that chance to see how it is before you commit. So then what you need to do is get one of the, what they do, they come with a lollipop stick. And somehow I am absolutely amazing at using lollipop sticks. Right, let's get another one that's got a lollipop stick in it. There you go, this is what they come with. This is another lovely set as well. This one's Retrology. This one's gorgeous, especially if you're doing a men's card or something. Really good fun, love these. Right, so get the little stick out. If I actually put them back after I'd used them, I wouldn't keep losing them. So the key to this is to hold your transfer down, hold it in place all the time until the whole thing's transferred. And what happens is you're, I don't know if you can actually see that on the camera, but as it's transferred, it goes slightly grey instead of being the dark black. If you hold it in place, it means that you can lift up and see if you've got any bits missing. And these also, as you can see, I'm going over the embossing powder, so these are really good for using over texture, whereas sometimes stamping over texture can be a bit tricky. And as you can see here, they work on fabric as well. So I'm holding that in place and I'm lifting up, and because I can see there's nothing on the top sheet, it shows me that the whole transfer has moved over. It's gone down to there. So you can see that transfer there. What you can then do is either come in with the shiny stuff, clear varnish lacquer, which will give it that kind of effect, or you could go in with your super matte varnish, which will make the whole thing look matte. So that's entirely up to you. So that's that bit. That went there. And then the other bit was the transfer, which just I did onto here. I do love using a bit of fabric. And let's give that a little tear. Frayed fabric. You can say frayed fabric. That's still a bit big. Now you can't wash this obviously, but if you're sticking it on something like a journal, you're not going to wash it, are you? And you can see I'm sort of pulling this fabric around and it's still holding. You don't want to pull it too much. With anything on there, you wouldn't want to pull it too much, but okay. And then I think that will do. So what I would do with that is just get a little bit of Andy's quick grab glue, and I would use a brush behind it. And some of my brushes are really, I kind of use those for all these jobs that are, you know, using products that you wouldn't want to use your best brushes for. And so I would just pop that on the back. Can you actually see that? Yes, you can. Pop that on the back. A bit like you would with rice papers and decoupage. Still got a bit of yellow in my brush from the coaster. That's alright. And then I know I wanted to go somewhere around there, so I just put a little bit there. And then stick that down. If you wanted to, you could go over the top. It's probably a good idea with the transfers to go over it with either the glue or the varnish. And always, always, always come back in with your spritzer and clean up your workstation, because you don't want the glue drying. Although I must admit, even when this dries, I just get one of those glass cleaner scraper things and I just scrape it off. But it's just so much easier and quicker to do it if you can just wipe it off while it's wet. So that kind of shows you how I did this. So that was the chalk paints. It was this stamp is called Typology, which it's so easy to get wrong because I see the word typography and I want to say it. Typology, it's called. Ology. It's an ology, which reminds me of Del Boy, Fools and Horses. So I use the Bubble Girl stamp on here. And what I would do on the edge is I would go round either with, maybe something like this. Maybe this is his raw umber. And you could go around with this, or you could go around with something like a gilding wax or something, which would be quite nice. Could use a paintbrush, obviously, but why would I use a paintbrush when I can get my hands covered in paint? Why would I do that? That would just be far too easy, wouldn't it? And the other thing you can do with this paint is if you feel that that colour is too bright for you, if you are a kind of grungy crafter, then, as I said before, these paints are quite translucent, so you can go over the whole thing and knock that right back. If I've just left a bit of the bright colour showing, so you can see at the top here I haven't put the paint, and where I've gone over with, I mean, that was just the merest hint of a wash, it knocks it right back and makes it grungy. And you could actually do that with the fabric, so let's see how that works. I go onto this fabric, which is wet, and I don't move that transfer about too much because I've gone over it and I've gone under it. But if I come in with the, you can see the tiniest amount I've got on my mat there. If I go in like that, I can just age that, which kind of ties in a bit more, doesn't it, with that particular transfer. And it also means that you can almost highlight him. And actually what you can do, if you wanted to, you can paint on top. If you've covered it with something like the matte medium or a varnish or something like that, then you can go in and, excuse me wobbling the camera, you could actually paint it and highlight that a bit more. Just give that a little bit of a lift. If you don't like that, then just off it back. So that would be that one. Give you some ideas on how to do that sort of thing. If you've got a little, if you want to do an art journal page or the front cover of a journal, which is what I did there. It's a simple way of doing that. Just give that a little bit of a spritz. Right, now that my coaster has dried, let's come back to this. So if you remember, what I did here is I've upcycled an old coaster. I have covered it, I gave it a coat of the white, the chalk pen. And then I used Andy's primary artist's pigment paints in the blue and, oh, Mandy Taylor, hi Twinny, how are you, darling? Oh, I'm so sorry I missed you at the studios, it would have been lovely to see you. So here we've got the primary yellow and primary blue. That's what I did on here, and I did mix a little bit of the white chalk paint in as well, and just blended some of the colour. I didn't fuss too much because we're going to cover it up. So let's come back to this. Now I've just used the typology stamp, so I'm going to swap that because that's how I roll. I'm going to swap the typology for tickets, just tickets, which is another really cool one. Now I'm going to use the lid as just a press, and I'm going to pop that down. And what should I do? I'll use the black. I'll use this one, the VersaFine Clair, which is a sticky ink pad. It's a pigment ink pad and it's sticky, so it's going to stay wet. So to make sure that I don't then smudge it, because I'm Mrs. Clumsy from Clumsyland, I will throw over some clear embossing powder. That is the trick to dealing with, especially if you're going over paints and things like that. Sometimes I find the ink pads, even ones that are supposed to be fast drying, sometimes can stay sticky, and then you smudge them. You go to move them and it's all smudged and your beautiful work is ruined, just ruined. Right, so I've got my upcycled Woodware and whatnot. Now, because I've only just painted this, what I should do is go over it with my anti-static pad. Right, so it looks dry, but there's no harm in just giving it a little tap with that. If I'm going to be throwing embossing powder on it. If I wasn't going to emboss it, it wouldn't matter. Now, I'm going to stand up for this. Because now the other thing about this stamp platform is that because it's got these two spongy bits here, I can actually position it on the left hand side and then press down, almost like I was using a stamp pad. And because there's that little bit of flex, because it's a plastic, like, you know, just like your normal stamping blocks really, but a thin one. And then that's that. Now you can see from this is meant to be quite grungy. So here's the one I did before, but you can actually, there are two tickets which are complete, so you could actually cut those out and use those quite nicely. So now I'm going to get my clear embossing powder and I'm going to get a fresh sheet of paper, because I don't want to use the sheet I had before, because I used that for the coloured powders. Hi Helen. And then with the coloured powders, if I then, you know, you get a bit of contamination then, don't you, if I use that same sheet, because it would have bits of coloured powder on it and they'd end up in my white, which I've done so many times before. Now I can see a fleck of coloured powder there. Look, oh, naughty, naughty. But at the end of the day, you know, life's too short to worry about the odd fleck. A misplaced fleck here and there is not going to ruin our lives. Let's just not let it. Okay, so back to my noisy heat gun. This is, as I say, this is a Woodware one. This is absolutely fantastic because you've got two settings, high and low, and it is so fast. La la la, getting it up to temperature. Now, because this is quite thick, it takes a while to warm up. So this will take longer for the embossing powders to turn than a piece of card. And again, what you want to do is only move your heat gun as you see the powders melt. Last bit. Right, I can see just a little bit down the corner that may not be. It is helpful to actually make sure that you do melt all the powder, because otherwise then when you go over it, because if I'm going to use this as a coaster, I want to protect it, so I would use something like the I would use this, the super matte varnish, and I've gone over this with the super matte varnish with one coat, and you can see it's created that matte effect. So if you want the matte effect, if I did another coat it would all be matte. If you want this to be matte, then go over with the varnish. And this is, it's got a polyurethane base, and that means that it's super tough. It's also, it's weather resistant, so you can use it indoors and outdoors. And something else. Oh yeah, UV. It's UV resistant, so it means that your work shouldn't discolour. So, yeah, so that's quite useful. If you want it to stay shiny, then go over it with a different type of varnish. There's lots out there on the market. I'm sure Mandy's got some for Candence or Imagination Crafts that she uses. So that's quite fun. Da 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 da. You could do a whole set of those. How quick is that? Because you just batch make it. You would just paint them all white, then you would add the colour to them all, and then stamp them all. And you could stamp them with all different stamps, as I've shown you here. I've stamped it with different stamps. It's quite a nice little fun set and a great way to upcycle. Okay, let's just give this a little bit of a clean up. Right, let's come back to our stamping that we did earlier. Now, I've squished it, so that's not a problem, is it? But you can see the effect there, can't you? And you can see how, once you layer it up, it's going to look something like that. Yeah, so that's quite a simple, fun way to do it. What I would probably normally do is do it on a bigger piece of card. Then you can cut it down and get your artwork central. But the other thing that you can do is, once you've stamped it like that, if you wanted to, you could come back in. I should dry it really. Very naughty girl. So what I'm going to do is just pick up the rest of it. There you go. And come back to your ink pad. And I've lost the stamp. There we go. Put the stamp back down. And you don't have to do it too accurately, because it's, give it a sort of smudgy look. Pop that down. I'm putting everything away. I'm never so tidy in my life normally, goodness me. Now you can see from the cotton that the kitchen towel, I just got a few bits on the watercolour card, so get rid of those because they might cause you problems. Ink that up again. You could use a different colour. You could use black if you wanted to, but I think black for me would be a little bit hard. And stamp over the top. And then you could do the whole thing again. If you didn't like that, if it was too blurry, give it another little look, and it will be softer than the harsh stamped image, but it would be more clear than that. So that's another way of doing it. And then, as I say, just add him a little heart and some cut out words. That's about that one. What else have we got? What else have we got? Okay, we've also got right, so here's another little heart, and what I did with this one was I did the embossing and the transfers, and then Andy's got some of these rice papers. These ones are called labels, which really like these. But what I find sometimes with some of the rice papers is there might be something on it that I think, oh, that's not something I would use, but there's usually something on it that I can pull out. So, for example, something like this, I've basically cut out that and I've stuck it over the top, and then I've just gone over with a bit of the raw umber just to vintagey that, like I did earlier. So that's always a good thing to do. And if I show you what I did here, move that out of the way. With this one, what I did, scissors, was I took again one of those little hearts from that little set that I showed you earlier, painted it white, and then I cut out this bit So what I did was, I sort of, and I know you know lots of ways that you can do this with your rice papers, because if you wet them they'll just tear without any edge. But for something like this where you're going to go over the edge anyway, I basically just pop that down, and then I've got this. I used Andy's glue, and if you mix his glue 50-50 with water, it can become a really nice decoupage glue. So I'll do the same thing again. Normally I would actually pour this into a little jar, a little container, but for the sake of speed, let's just pop a little bit down there. A little bit. Decoupage the whole desk with that. Bit of kitchen towel just to dry off my mucky brush, and I would put some on there, some on the back of the rice paper, pick that up and place it, and fiddle about with it until I knew it was in the right sort of place. And trim that into the middle just to make it easier to wrap around. And then leave that to one side to dry. But you play about that, and the nice thing about these rice papers, they're really strong, so you can just keep manipulating them. And then once you've done that, just put that to one side to dry, once you're happy with that. And then you can, once it's completely dry, you can just use a file and sand off the edges. And that's what I did there. I just sanded these down, and I went round with the embossing powder. So I'll show you what I mean. So I leave that to dry. Clear up the gloop. Also make sure you give the scissors a wipe, because I don't think I even use those. Move those to one side. Clean up this old mess. I am not the sort of person that likes to clean up, but it really does make a difference, because the amount of times I've ruined things because I've had the remnants of something else on my desk that I haven't cleaned up is it's just a bit bonkers, really. For the few seconds it takes just to wipe your 6x6 clear space, it is worth doing. Put the lid back on your products. Always put the lid on your products. So basically what I did there was I went over this with the magenta, and I went straight onto the grey board. This is one of the tickets, and I like these because they're a bit of a change from the ATCs. They're a nice size for doing a project, and you could drill holes in these and put a little bit of ribbon or chain or something on the top to hang them, or you could stick them onto the front of a glass frame, or you know, whatever. You could even make a book, a concertina book, with these as the front and back cover. So basically what I did with that was I got a bit of the magenta, pop that down, give that a little swirl. Oh, poor old brush, look at that. Give that a little bit of a swirl. These are beautiful paints, they do cover really nicely. Now obviously that is way too dark, so what I'll do with that is come in with a bit of the white. Now I'm going to rinse that brush off, because that's such a strong colour. If I go anywhere near that with the white, it's just going to go back to red again. And also I would just take a bit of this off, add a bit of the white. Give that little flickety flick. Happy with that. And then what I would do is, these are some more pages from the old book I was telling you about. So I would just rip a few bits of this and a bit more of the glue. Why did I clear it all up? Why didn't I just put it somewhere that I could work around it? Again, give your brush a bit of a clean. Now I've got very dirty water here, so there is a very high chance that anything that I glue is going to end up with a pink tinge. Doesn't matter, does it? And then just stick a bit of this down. Look at that, it's going pink. So the way to get around that is to get a bit of paper. See, look at the colour of my water. How can I clean anything with that? So I could use my spritzer and dab off and tone that down a little bit. So ideally let that dry, but you can see where I'm going. I would cover that with various bits of this, and then I've done the same thing on an ATC. See, similar thing. And then I'll just wipe that bit behind it. 50% demo, 50% clean up. Now, if you want to tone that down, the way that I got this slightly more vintage effect was just to go in with a bit of this raw umber, which I showed you earlier. Now, I should use a clean brush, but oh, I just can't be bothered. Let's just see what happens when we go in with a pink tinged brush. And you want this as a wash. So if you remember from the bit that I did earlier how tiny the amount was that I had on my desk. See, that's too much. So just go back and forwards and just get that to the place where you're happy with it. And you can dab off if you want to. Gives it quite a nice effect. Then I would let that dry. Well, let's give that a little dry now because there's not a lot of paint in there, so that won't take long. And that's pretty much dry. And then this one, you can see that's pretty dry. I'll give that a bit of a zap. And then I would do the same thing with that. I would come in, this isn't dry, so please let it dry properly. Come in and just grunge it up a little bit if that's the look that you like. And you can either put a lot on and then just spritz it and see what happens. I quite like that effect. And then you can dry bits as you go and come in from the other end. Now I can see I've got some white paint there, so it's going to end up just being a lot lighter, isn't it, if I spritz that? But we'll see. Let's have a look. So, and it just gives you a flavour of the sort of difference in tones you can get from the really bright pink by just toning it down a bit with some of that raw umber. If you look at the colour there to the colour up there, it's quite different, isn't it? So what I would do was I would layer those up, put lots of this book pages on it. And then also in the background, you can see that the other part of her, where I chopped her out, you see there's this little wreath thing here at the bottom. So I'll just cut this enough so I can have it under the camera without being too big. Right, so that's the rest of it. So it was sort of like that. And then I just cut little bits of the roses and stuck those on. Can you see that there and there? But you want to make sure that they're going to go where they're visible. So think about your placement for that. So that will go somewhere like that. This is all still moving because it's all wet. And you can just move those around until you're happy with them. And then there's just a couple more bits here. I'll do the same thing. So as you can see, I've done that here, popped them around, and I've taken some of the words from the page. So I've popped that down. But behind it, I've just popped a little bit of vintage thread, and I've used this lovely old thread, a Silco Peach Rose. And I've just got loads of little bits of that. I've also got a bit of Hessian. And the other thing that you can do is take something like this. I did this as a beaded wired star that I had, and what you can do is like just wire up some beads and put those around it. You could do something like that, which will give it a really nice effect as well. So that would be just the background with a bit more of the raw umber, some threads, Hessian, layer that up, then get your heart, some more threads and a bit of beading. So that's how I came up to that as well. So that is that one. So what have we done today? I've showed you how to get to this. I've showed you how to do these. I have showed you how to make this, and I've showed you, how to wobble the camera. I showed you how to make this. Hello, what's happened there? Lost the camera. Oh, hello! I know it's done, it's reversed it. So let me just reverse it back again. There we are. So that's that one. So those are the projects that I've shown you today. I tried to put the camera back up. It's done it again. It's turning it around. Right, there we go. So I'm going to finish off holding this because when I tried to put it back in the camera mount, it just turned it off. Anyway, thank you for joining me. So 1, 2, 3, 4 different projects using Andy Skinner's new stamps and some of his paints, a few other bits and pieces. Thank you so much for joining me, and this is the normal chaos. This is how I roll. So have a good day, and thank you for joining me, and catch up with you soon. Thank you. Bye.